Yeah. So I guess we're just going to start off with the basics. What is Western medicine? Oh, I think you want to, yeah. So essentially, it's defined as a system in which doctors and other healthcare professionals, like nurses, pharmacists, and therapists, kind of treat symptoms and diseases using drugs, radiation, or surgery. Definitely a lot of differences between Western medicine and Eastern medicine, but the main ones that I'm going to be highlighting are just it's relatively younger than Eastern medicine. So they're both like thousands of years old, but Western medicine is relatively younger. And then Hippocrates is largely considered the father of Western medicine. And essentially, the focus is on diagnosing and treating a disease or illness based on patient symptoms. And for treatment, they usually offer pharmaceutical drugs, physical therapy, surgery, or other psychological counseling. And so for the images at the bottom, I literally Googled Western medicine, and the first images that popped up was the one on the left. So I think that's very telling about pharmaceutical drugs being a super major focus in Western medicine, and definitely to the right is like technological advancements. So yeah, and this infographic is just kind of showing like another photo that I found online where the right is kind of what people think about Western medicine, and then the left is a school of thought on Eastern medicine. Yeah.
So just talking a little bit more about what we mean when we say Eastern medicine. So like Anish mentioned, Eastern medicine is a little bit older than Western medicine. Our records date back as far as 2,200 years ago in ancient China, is where we have the earliest codified records of medicinal practices that are still in use today. When we say Eastern medicine, that's a pretty vague and pretty broad term. We're actually talking about a huge range of treatments that covers most of the Asian continent. The primary countries that a lot of these systems come out of are China and India. So I've just listed a couple of examples here: acupuncture, Ayurveda, homeopathy, Tai Chi, and massage. These are all examples of Eastern medicine. But as a concept, it covers a huge range of traditions. There's a lot of interplay between certain religious practices as well. The key difference between Eastern medicine and Western medicine is the focus on holisticism versus reductionism. So like Anish mentioned, the real focus of Western medicine is it sort of comes out of the thinking of the Industrial Revolution. If you think of the human body as a machine, if you are sick, that means some part of your body is not working. Your gear is clogged up or you have a broken circuit or something. That's the kind of model that we use. And so in order to fix the problem, you need to find that specific part that's wrong, and address the root cause, and then everything else will work perfectly after that. Holisticism and Eastern medicine talks a lot more about the interrelatedness of, say, the mind and the body, about how there's different parts of your body that can affect other parts, and about how your lifestyle can also affect your internal health. It's much more about addressing the entire life of an individual rather than reducing them to like an individual root cause that could be causing a particular problem. There are a lot of benefits to both Western and Eastern medicine. A lot of modernist practices in using Eastern medicine to complement Western medicine. So there are absolutely things that have to be treated through surgery, radiation therapy, or pharmaceuticals, but it really is key to address also some of the social and economic factors that could be contributing to a lack of health. If you think back to our social determinants of health from before, that sort of gives you an idea of where the Eastern approach might be integrated with modern Western medicine.
So there are a very few countries, unfortunately, that have it integrated, both Eastern and Western medicine together. India is one of them. They don't have it 100% integrated, but there is some aspect of Eastern medicine being used and being taught to doctors as well in medical school. So an example of that would be doctors generally tend to recommend Ayurvedic remedies for preventative reasons or for illnesses they believe that cannot be easily remedied by Western medicine. An example is chronic kidney failure. Once it's reached a certain point, there is currently no method other than like a kidney transplant and constant dialysis to treat that. So they recommend some Ayurvedic treatments, which actually have been proven to be effective before. So that's one of the things. And they also recommend a lot of home remedies, like which have roots in Eastern medicine and in the Hindu texts, such as turmeric and peppermilk, which I'm sure you've heard of before. And yeah, in India, Western medicine became highly popular after the British colonization of India. So over time, it became the most popular form of medicine. But in the last about 30 years, once India has gained independence, which was not too many years ago, but they kind of started to bring back the Eastern medicine into Western medicine. So it's become a more holistic healthcare. And since we are Globe Meds, a good thing to mention, at the Thailand-Myanmar border, the natural malaria like preventative medication is really, really popular and even prescribed by doctors just generally because it's good to take. And so thought that was an interesting fact to throw in.
All right. I'm going to be talking about the focus or philosophy of Western and Eastern medicine. So let's start with Western medicine. Western medicine mainly focuses on curing illness, or at the very least reducing the symptoms of disease. Stuff like drugs, vaccinations, physical therapy, and immuno or chemotherapy all work directly to eliminate some type of disease from the body. Treatment from Western medicine usually has a defined start and end point. It starts with diagnosis and basically ends when the symptoms cease. The techniques of Western medicine usually come from rigorous experimentation and research stages, and they're widely based on the scientific method and like research evidence. Western medicine tends to be quicker, but may have some adverse side effects. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the focus of Eastern medicine, it has an emphasis on preventing illness and maintaining good health and well-being. Eastern medicine does not traditionally cure illness, but the treatments are usually meant to be maintained and may possibly include in the way of life. Things such as meditation or Ayurvedic medicine usually are meant to be included in like your just your daily routine. It also uses a holistic approach, which accounts for problems outside the body and considers the patient's like situations as well. And therapies may take longer to work compared to Western medicine, but they're way more personalized.
Okay, and unfortunately, there is quite a stigma against Eastern medicine. Most of it can be boiled down really just to basic racism. A lot of the way how Western people are exposed to Eastern medicine is through cultural appropriation stereotypes. You see this a lot, especially in media, with like regards to movies, how it's seen as something so exotic or so foreign or whatever. And it's viewed as very unconventional, or even if you get really deep into it, a lot of people see it as a more primitive form of medicine than Western medicine. And that is really just due to the racism that is an inherent component of why there is such a stigma against it. A lot of people also distrust it, and it's not really like due to anything that's really wrong with it. It's just that a lot of medical researchers don't really see a purpose in studying it, let alone having any funding going toward studying it. They say that it does take longer to work, and there is quite a bit of change required within a person's life. So it kind of turns a lot of people off, especially in our society, who want things like now, like right now. Like I want to change right now, but I don't really want to do anything to go for it. And of course, there is appropriation by the anti-vax movement, especially in regards to holistic medicine, who believe that, if you just like incorporate more fruit into your diet, you don't have to worry about getting polio, when that is really like the opposite of the truth, unfortunately. Next slide. Okay, and on the flip side of that, there is a distrust of Western medicine. Unfortunately, a lot of this is due to the history behind it, and some of this does still continue today. For example, ableism is really rampant throughout the entire medical field. A lot of doctors have been complained about for not listening to their patients or their concerns. And a big portion of this is due to the history of eugenics. Eugenics is basically a movement which says we want to get rid of people that we see as not being productive to society, especially people who are disabled or are seen as having bad genes. And of course, a lot of this goes back into the cost of medicine. Especially in America, we see that a lot of medicine is cost-based. A lot of companies look at it and see how much of a profit can I make off of somebody else. Big Pharma is especially a big culprit of this in regards to A, medical bills, and B, examples like the opioid epidemic. Doctors will prescribe quite a bit of painkillers, even though they did know at the time that opioids were highly addictive. but they thought that the profit was worth it, unfortunately. And of course, we can't forget that there are many social inequities in Western medicine. There is a lack of quality care and access due to medical bias. Many doctors, again, don't listen to their patients a lot in Western medicine. They think that if they can just pinpoint it to one thing, then they can cure that person of everything in life. And that simply is not true.
All right, I'm going to be talking about a few things, most specifically the commodification of Eastern medicine in the Western medicinal world, as well as some things that we can add into Western medicine practices to make it more of a holistic perspective or approach. So first, the designations of medicine. So obviously, there's a lot of different types of medicine, and they need the appropriate recognition in modern healthcare systems. So what do we call them? Oftentimes complementary and alternative are the terms that come up as the most popular. And although they are somewhat synonymous, they are markedly different in their connotation, more specifically their relationship, the role that the medicine plays in relationship to Western medicine, and how that Western medicine has kind of come to try and take over or dominate healthcare over the planet, and obviously it's considered inappropriate to label traditional medicine such as Chinese, Arabic, and Ayurvedic medicine in relation to another practice. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So marketing, not medicine. There's a lot of different companies in the US that have really come to whitewash traditional health therapies for profit. Most specifically, I have an example of Gwyneth Paltrow, who owns the company ghU or started the company ghU. And this is where it comes to be a huge issue because these companies fail to engage with the cultural heritage of the traditional health and well-being practices in any meaningful way. And there's failure to attribute to their traditional origins. There's absence of fact checking and a lack of balanced representation in arguments for and against these therapies, which ultimately whitewashes them. And when these therapies have a long and rich history, it represents a form of colonization and commodification of non-Western practices that has existed for centuries. And experts showcased using these therapies are often white from Western cultures rather than people who are from the culture and ethnicity that have been practicing these therapies for centuries long in old traditions. And oftentimes, specifically with this example of ghU, these therapies are marketed as economically inaccessible, kind of commodifying health and well-being as something that only wealthy people deserve to have. And then next, I wanted to talk a little bit more about internationalization. Most specifically, I did the example of traditional Chinese medicine. And the most fundamental disadvantage of TCM being internationalized is that the nations that it is internationalized to don't really understand or truthfully understand the value and worth of TCM. So how can it be practiced authentically, and how can its true hospitality show through if this is not understood? It basically means it's stripping away the traditional elements and utilizing them in a different environment with different patients who have different cultural beliefs. And it kind of presents TCM as an ethnic novelty instead of using it for its strong efficiency and medicinal effect. And it is kind of not giving it its true and proper placement among medicine in the Western world. Obviously, there's also a huge financial gain, as healthcare is a huge business in the Western world, and money is kind of consumerism and capitalism are kind of some things that the Western world is a little bit more focused on. So there are big financial revenues for people who are involved in the exportation of TCM. And after the money is made, no one is really going to be concerned about the origin of the great medicine. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit more about what else Western medicine is missing, more specifically, women's background and history in medicine. The history of women as lay healers had a huge impact on the witch persecutions. And now most scholars agree that witches cannot be differentiated from the rest of the population. Women's prominence as cooks, healers, and midwives made them more vulnerable to the charge that they practiced harmful magic. And oftentimes the description of women who were accused of witchcraft was making and administering special remedies, providing expert forms of nursing, or serving in some regular ways, midwives. Also, when Europeans first began settling in America, they relied on the plant wisdom of indigenous people, particularly women. And from the 17th to 19th century, medicine of Native American women and African American slave women was proved to be much more advanced than European herbalism. And female herbal healers in slave communities based their practices on ancestral African traditions while collaborating with Native Americans to find the herbal counterparts in the New World. All of this to kind of say that what could have been a proud occupation for women and a field for lively intellectual inquiry was discredited. And as healthcare professionals, this was a time when women were largely confined to subordinate roles as nurses and aides. And although women are 75% of health workers, healthcare was kind of the property of male professionals. So that kind of concludes our presentation. Now we're going to be broken off into breakout rooms and kind of discussing what we learned a little bit, I guess. And then we can you guys can fill out your feedback in a Google form that Jonathan made. And then we can come back together and share feedback.